Good morning. This is Tammy from Impressors Extraordinaire, and I'm going to show you a card today that I've done a few cool techniques on, and hopefully you'll like what I've done and you'll want to replicate them. So the card that I'm making for you today is this one. And let me see if I can bring it a little closer to the camera so that you can see the detail. And the sets that I'm using to make this card are the Kirby Christmas for the sentiment, and really it's the only stamped piece. But the dies that I'm using are the Pine Woods dies. I also use the stitched rectangle framelits, and the embossing folder that I used was the Evergreen Forest. So let me show you those things. So here's the Evergreen Forest embossing folder. It's a really large one, so you can make cards that are this size, which are, when they're folded flat, they're 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, or you can make larger projects. Isn't that pretty? And then here is the stitched rectangle dies, and I'm using this die for this piece that layers onto the cherry cobbler. And the cardstock that I'm using, the light color is Sahara Sand. That's this one. Cherry Cobbler, which is the red, and then I am using Mossy Meadow for the trees. So I've got that all prepared for you so you can see the finished product, and then I'm going to show you how I did those techniques. I've got some, looks like a snowstorm blowing in and snow all over the trees, and so I'm going to show you how I did those things. So I'll set this card aside and bring in my components for the card. So this piece of Sahara Sand, you're going to cut it to 4 by 5 1/4 and then run it through your machine with your Evergreen Forest embossing folder. And then this piece of cherry cobbler cardstock is 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, and it'll layer like this. And of course your card base is 5 1/2 by 8 1/2 with a score down the middle at 4 1/4. So let's get that folded real quick. Use the bone folder to make a nice crisp fold. Set it aside. And then I've got these two pieces, the Sahara Sand, that I cut, let's see, I think it was 1 1/2, yeah, 1 1/2 by 3 3/4, and then I used the stitch rectangle dies to cut it. And then this will layer underneath it, and it's cut at 1 3/8 by 3 3/8, so they layer really nicely. And then I've got my rhinestones that I use as symbols for cardinals. We don't have any teeny tiny cardinals in any of the stamp sets that we have or anything, so I'm using those representative of the cardinals on my card. And then I also cut a piece of Mossy Meadow that's 3 1/2 by 5, which will easily get you these 3 trees. And the framelits that I used for that are the Pine Woods dies. So this is the Pine Woods dies, and these are the dies. So you've got several options of trees, and you can also either do solid trees, or you can do all kinds of cool things with the outlining framelits or dies, as we call them. And then here is the tree that I use to cut these trees. So I cut those. And this is actually a bundle that the dies and the stamps come in, the Inlet Pines bundle. So these are the stamps that you get. Wow, look at all those stamps with the bundle. So you get the dies and the stamps. And if you buy the bundle, you get a 10% discount off of that bundle, whereas if you buy the units separately, then you pay full price. So good idea to get the bundle. And here's the Kirby Christmas that I used, the Thinking of You at Christmas, but there are so many other pieces to that. And the Kirby Christmas is available right now as a bundle. And you can also get not only the bundle, which includes the stamp set and the die, but you can also get another stamp set that goes with the dies that is for all of the other occasions, and there are other sentiments in it. And you also, if you get the product suite, you get some designer paper and I believe some ribbon too. So let's go ahead and get started with the technique that I'm using. So I'm going to put all of the pieces together that I'm using this technique on. So I've got them all right here. And I'm going to set those things aside. And the first thing that I want to do is take the Craft white ink pad, open it up completely, and take this piece and just start running it along my cardstock, just getting ink on there and rotating the cardstock as I go. I want to do it top to bottom and bottom to top. I want it all flowing the same way. Don't know why, just my desire. You can try it other ways if you'd like. As I always say, this is your project, your card. Do it the way you want to do it. And then take this little piece too and get some ink on that. Because the last thing you want is a snowstorm and then all of a sudden something looking like it doesn't fit in because there's no snow on it at all. So let's put some snow on this too. So I've got that. And then we'll close this up. And the next thing that I want to do is bring in some of the splatter. Let's see if I can show you the splatter on this one. Do you see these little dots up here? That's all from splattering ink onto it, and it just looks like the wet snow falling down. So I'll show you how I did that next. So I've got a block that you normally put a stamp on, but this time I'm going to put ink on it, and I put a glob of the white craft ink and about a 1/4 inch blob. Let me scoot these up so that we're completely in the view of the camera. Set that ink bottle aside. And then you can use, if you're new to Stampin' Up, the aqua painters are no longer. However, we have another option, which are the water painters, which are essentially the same with this one and this one. And then they have a wider tipped brush on this painter. So if you're new to Stampin' Up, this is what you'll purchase, the water painters. But if you have been with Stampin' Up long enough, you've used the aqua painters. And I personally like to use the older option because it's used, and if I make a mess with it, I'm not so worried that it won't clean up and that it might mess things up. I don't think it would. I think you can completely clean it. I have been able to. But just, just thinking, the older, the more you can kind of do the crazy techniques, kind of like this if you want to consider it crazy. So you're just going to put the watered down ink. I don't know if you saw me do that, but I squeezed my aqua painter so that I got some water in the paint. And now it's thinning it down. Oh, and by the way, this is a really messy technique, so you'll want to clean it up right after you play. It'll clean up easily, but don't let it dry because I'm not sure how easily it would clean after that. But you're going to splatter. Are you seeing the splatter coming onto the trees and onto the light brown, the Sahara sand cardstock? I'll show you a close-up once I'm finished. But do you see it splattering over on this? And that's okay. It's not going to affect the beauty of this card. But just kind of pound the painter against your finger. Just kind of giving it a little extra pressure as it hits so that you get the splatter. And when you have the desired effect that you want on your trees and on your background, you can stop. And I'm just going to clean my brush up real quickly. I'm using a baby wipe. Love baby wipes for cleaning things up. There's also our chamois that we have, the Simply Chamois, and it does a great job too. But I just have these handy and I will use them. All right, so got some on my desks here, so then I'm gonna clean that up real quick. And I am going to set these pieces aside. Finished with those. Let them dry completely. And then after I get my block cleaned off, I am going to add the, I guess flocking is a good word for it. The snow that looks like it's just been slammed onto the trees. And with that, I am using the shimmery white embossing paste, and I'll show you that here in a minute. All right, set this aside. And this is the shimmery white embossing paste. Embossing paste is something that came to us through Stampin' Up! A few years ago. And one of the things that I learned about it is that it dries out quickly. So sometimes if you're not using it often, you go back then a few months later to use it and it's all dry. But the cool thing is, if you use a clean utensil and water that no one has drank out of, so don't use water out of your glass or anything, just use it straight out of the faucet, you can actually rehydrate the embossing paste and it's good to go for another day. Just make sure that you always keep the lid tight, but don't fear if you open it up and it's dried out, because you can rehydrate it. So I'm just randomly using my palette knife to kind of splatter some of this embossing paste on the tree, and do it for all of them. And it just looks like, I don't know if you've ever been out in a snowstorm, but sometimes the temperature is low enough that the snow is really, really wet, and you get this really globular, beautiful effect. And the embossing paste is the perfect element to get this effect. So you just kind of put it on there and take it off as you want. And ta-da. And the other thing that you need to know with regard to cleaning the embossing paste off of your tools is, because it does dry quickly, you need to make sure that you clean your tools right after you're finished doing the application, because it could dry on your tools and then it kind of creates an issue when you want to go use your tools again, because it almost dries as hard as concrete. So always keep it cleaned off. All right, I am going to set aside these trees and let them dry too. And I have pre-done those elements. So I'll bring those in and we'll put this card together. All right. Okie dokie. So we want to go ahead and stamp this piece with our sentiment. And like I said, we're using cherry cobbler ink. So let's get that ready. And ink this stamp up very well. Check and make sure you've got ink all over. And then center it. And when you leave your inked up stamp on your cardstock for longer than just a few seconds, the ink has time to soak into the cardstock and you get a little bit bolder image than if you just stamp it quickly and bring it back off. So we've got our sentiment here. Clean that off. And I don't know if you're familiar with using the red inks. They will stain your photopolymer stamps, but it doesn't affect the use of the stamp. It doesn't hurt the stamp at all, but it does leave a stain. But don't worry about that. You're okay. Close up my ink. This stamp is really, or this card is really neat because it looks kind of glamorous, but there's not a lot of work to it. All right, the next thing that we want to do is go ahead and layer pieces. So I'm going to use my Tombow liquid glue, but you can use the Stampin' Seal, or you can use the tear and tape, whatever your preferred method of adhesion is. There's no right or wrong way to do it. And then go ahead and center that there. And then I'm going to go ahead and use my regular Stampin' Dimensionals, and I won't stick it down yet because I wanted to put my trees on my card front. But I'm going to go ahead and put these on this piece because eventually this will be popped up off of the card front. So we'll just get it ready to go. And then I want to take my trees off and put this piece using my, once again, Tombow liquid glue. On the back here. I just really like this. I mean, it's good for so many things. I don't know that there's anything that it's not good for. So I really like to use the liquid glue. And go ahead and center that on our cherry cobbler piece. And then take this and again put your glue on there. And then this piece will layer onto your card base. And we're just about done. The next thing that we need to do is figure out where we want to put our trees. Oh, it got a little stuck there. Did you see that? No big deal. It came right off. So, you know, kind of put them on there and play with it and see where you think is best for your trees. The one thing that I do like to do is make sure that the base of my tree is underneath my sentiment piece, the label piece. So I think that looks pretty good. I think that's where I'm going to let them land. So you can do one of two things. You can pop these up with dimensionals, and if you do that, I would use the small dimensionals, these little mini dimensionals. Can you see how tiny they are? Here are the regular sized ones. So see the difference? But that's what I would do. I would pop them up with the small ones. But I think I'm just going to take my multi-purpose adhesive and kind of keep my tree where the spot is that I want it to stay. And then put a little bit of glue on the back. And press it down. I didn't put glue all over it because I do want a little bit of dimension. So see how it's left kind of popped up there? I'll show you that as soon as I get the rest of my trees adhered. And then last one. Let's put him down there. Straighten him up. There we go. And then take your label or your sentiment piece and take the backing off of your dimensionals. And then lay it, and I like to kind of center it from side to side, kind of make it even there, making sure that I'm catching my tree trunks there under the label. And give that a press. And then the last thing that I did, I'll move these out of the way real quick, is like I had mentioned earlier, I wanted a cardinal in my scene on my card, but obviously we don't have any little teeny cardinals. So I decided to use the red rhinestones as a symbolic cardinal image. And I'm using my Take Your Pick tool. It has some adhesive down here, some little sticky here, that I can pry my rhinestone up with, and then my rhinestone will stick to that adhesive. And I can start placing my cardinals, if you will. So got one cardinal there. And how about a cardinal down in this little crevice here? And how about a cardinal in the other tree? Because you know, whenever you see one cardinal, you typically see several together. So let's put that one right in there. And then the other thing I want to do is put some rhinestones, kind of bring that bright red color into the remainder of my card to kind of draw it all together and make it unified. And put those there. And wow, that's pretty cool. Do you guys like it? Are you gonna make one? It's a really neat, quick and easy, but wow card. So that's the card that I have for you today. And then I have two other cards that I've made using that same technique, just a little bit different, each of them. So I've got, hello, it just fell. I guess this was the one that wants to come next. So I used the Granny Apple Green for that accent color, but I used the same technique. And then instead of making the trees the mossy meadow, I used the Sahara sand. And I used the splatter technique with my cherry cobbler ink that I had. So I just put the ink, the cherry cobbler ink, directly on this block, and then use the same splattering technique with the aqua painter. And then the other card that I have is this card. And I did the background, the mossy meadow, with the granny apple green trees. And then the card base, I used the granny apple green. I love granny apple green. It is such a cool color. But those are my cards that I've made. And I hope you enjoyed the techniques I showed you today. And if you would like to comment, I will have this card and the instructions on my blog at impressorsextraordinaire.blogspot.com. I'll also put it on my Facebook page, and you can find that at Impressors Extraordinaire, or look me up, Tammie Rundle, Tammie Rundle, on Facebook. And I think that's all I have for you today. So have fun making your Christmas cards. I hope you try these techniques. Maybe not necessarily this design, but use the technique however you would like to use it. And just basically have fun. Thanks for coming and watching today.